There is a moment every serious grower experiences when a long-held assumption breaks. For me, it came after revisiting agricultural records from ancient China, Korea and Japan describing fermented soil inoculants so effective that authorities periodically restricted their use to prevent land monopolies from gaining permanent advantage. These were not fertilizers in the modern sense. They were living brews designed to awaken soil biology so rapidly that exhausted ground could rebound in a single season. What happened when I tested one of these methods was not subtle. Within days, soil texture changed. Smell shifted from inert to alive. Plant response followed quickly. This guide explains what that ferment was, why it worked, and how the same principles can still be applied responsibly today. So, why did fermentation become central to ancient Asian soil mastery? Well, in East Asia, intensive agriculture developed earlier and honestly lasted longer than almost anywhere else. Fields were cropped continuously without collapse because, you see, farmers learned how to feed soil life rather than just the plants. Fermentation, became a tool to concentrate beneficial microorganisms, unlock nutrients and introduce them back into the ground in stable forms. Unlike raw manure or compost alone, ferments pre-digested organic material. Microbes multiply before application, not after. This meant soil responded immediately rather than waiting weeks for decomposition to begin. These methods were, guarded closely, passed through families or temples, and adapted locally based on climate and crops. What made some ferments controversial or, restricted was that certain ferments produced dramatic increases in yield and resilience. Historical records actually describe village-level disputes where access to fermented amendments determined who controlled the most productive land. In some regions, local authorities regulated production to, prevent ecological imbalance or unfair advantage. The issue was not danger, but power. Soil treated with living ferments recovered faster from flooding, drought and overuse. Once applied consistently, it could outperform neighbouring fields for years. This reputation led to secrecy, not because the methods were mystical, but because they worked too well. The core of many ancient Asian soil ferments was simple: carbohydrate, microbial source, and time. Cooked rice, grain wash water, fruit skins, or bran were used to capture wild microbes. These were combined with sugars such as molasses or honey to fuel rapid microbial reproduction. Over several days, bacteria and yeasts really took over, dominating the mixture. In longer ferments, beneficial fungi would follow along. The result, it was a living liquid, absolutely rich in enzymes, organic acids and microbial populations, all ready to colonize the soil. When this was applied to the ground, these organisms immediately began cycling nutrients, breaking down residues and stabilizing soil aggregates. It's quite remarkable how quickly they get to work. Now, let me explain how I applied the ferment and what changed first. The ferment was diluted heavily and applied as a soil drench, not as a foliar spray. Within just 24 hours, the soil odour shifted from neutral to earthy. Within about 3 days, the surface crust softened, which was quite remarkable. By the end of the week, earthworm activity had increased noticeably, really showing a positive shift in soil life. Plants responded by deepening their colour and pushing out new growth, even without any additional feeding. This, indicated improved nutrient availability rather than direct fertilization. The most striking change, honestly, was in water behaviour. The soil absorbed moisture faster and stayed damp for longer, all without becoming compacted. Now, let's talk about why this approach worked biologically rather than chemically. You see, ferments don't actually feed plants directly. Instead, they nourish the organisms that, in turn, feed the plants. The microbes we introduce end up competing with pathogens, unlocking minerals that were previously bound up, and they even communicate chemically with the roots. It's a fascinating, interconnected process. Organic acids play a crucial role here as they chelate nutrients and make them available to plants without relying on harsh salts. And enzymes. They speed up the decomposition of residues that are already present in the soil. It's all about working with nature's own systems. Fungal partners, in particular, are remarkable. They improve root access to phosphorus and important micronutrients, ensuring that plants have what they need to thrive. This is why, results appear quickly without overstimulation. So, how can modern growers apply this responsibly? Start small. Ferments are powerful because they are alive. Over-application, even with the best intentions, can temporarily imbalance soil biology. Always, and I do mean always, dilute heavily and observe the response before repeating. Apply to soil, not leaves, unless the ferment is specifically designed for foliar use. And honestly, use on biologically active ground rather than sterile potting mixes. Feed soil first, then plants. Ferments, amplify existing systems rather than replacing them. Consistency matters more than concentration, really. Why this method complements compost instead of replacing it. Compost builds structure and long-term fertility, while ferments act as catalysts. When combined, compost provides habitat and food, while ferments provide workforce. Ancient farmers understood this pairing. Ferments woke the soil. Compost sustained it. Using one without the other, it really limits the potential of both. Why this knowledge nearly disappeared, and why it matters now. Industrial agriculture favoured shelf-stable inputs and predictable chemistry. Living ferments do not fit centralised distribution models. They must be made locally and used fresh. As a result, they were dismissed as unscientific, despite centuries of documented success. In an era of degraded soils and rising input costs, rediscovering these methods is not nostalgia. It is necessity. What this teaches about soil recovery and patience. The overnight transformation was not magic. It was biology waiting for permission to work. Ancient farmers understood that soil is not inert. It is responsive, intelligent, and capable of rapid healing when treated correctly. Fermentation was their way of speaking the soil's language. If you value deep-rooted agricultural knowledge and methods that restore land instead of exhausting it, subscribe to Botanical Bliss and share this guide with growers ready to move beyond inputs and into understanding.